Hello, hello, hello. Can everybody hear me? Testing, testing.
I can hear you, Mr. Wilkinson. Good evening.
Hey, how are you today?
Good. How about you?
Just fine, just fine. Another Wednesday already. Time's flying away.
Yeah.
Flying away, for sure. Let's give the others a few moments. Check in. Henry,
Yes.
question for you. How do you pronounce your first name in public?
Enrique.
Enrique. Okay, the correct way.
Some be aiming to say Enrique. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, Enrique is actually the correct pronunciation. But
Yeah.
sometimes it means to change the spelling and the sound and other stuff as well. So I'm just checking to see your preferred expression, which is the correct one. Okay, Enrique.
Yeah.
See,
My first and middle name is Spanish.
what's your middle name?
I don't know if I want to say that.
It's in Spanish. Nobody except me will understand.
Oh, it's Pajarito.
Pajarito.
Mhm.
How cool is that? Now, how cool is that? That's different. Have you asked your folks how they came up with all that ingenious stuff?
I don't know because all of my siblings have a foreign name.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder what the original thought was behind that. Only your parents can tell you if they remember. Yeah, way to go. All
My
right.
father had these he had encyclopedias and then he had these red some kind of encyclopedia or like a history book. He
Right.
had a bunch of red books, and I don't know. He must be just was fascinated with Italy and Spanish countries, and I don't know.
Apparently so. Yeah. You'd be surprised to know what the history is behind all of that. And maybe one day they'll tell you.
Well, he won't be able to tell me anymore because he passed away in 2015.
Oh dear. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's why it's so important to get information when you can get information.
yeah.
You never know. You never know. Wow. Okay. Tanika.
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, Tanika. Okay, you're here. Good. And the other person I see in the room is Juliet.
Juliet was coming incognito because she have J. Musgrove.
Good night. Good evening. Whatever.
Juliet,
Hi.
how are you?
Much better.
Much better. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
that's not here last week.
No, I wasn't feeling well.
Yeah, the bug was trying to get you down.
Yes, yes. It still is. I'm still a little bit under the weather.
Yeah, I know. I can still hear a little bit in your voice, but it's good that you feel well enough to to join us tonight, because you know, next week, hopefully you'll be feeling 100% for your midterm examination.
Will
Yeah,
we
you
be
get books,
reviewing tonight?
Next week.
Are we reviewing tonight?
No, we're doing chapter 3. And
Gee.
yeah, and then, yeah, we're doing chapter 3 tonight, and then I'll give you a couple of pointers that should help you with your review, which is kind of a review. And you should be fine. There'll be no surprises. The exam is going to be the same format as I did in part 1. You're going to have to define.
Is multiple choice? Is it multiple choice?
No multiple choice.
Oh, what?
Not one.
That's
Well,
crazy.
I might put 1 just because you said so. Okay.
How many questions are there?
Somewhere between 10 and 15 questions.
Ugh, that's a lot, and none of multiple, just one multiple choice.
And that's only because you asked. Multiple choice questions can be a nightmare if you're not careful, by the way.
Okay.
Remember, when you do definitions and short answers, you get to write and come up with interesting stuff, and you can sometimes work your way through more points than with a multiple choice. You know, it's either right or wrong. There's no
Okay.
there's no half mark, half answer, none of that. So multiple choices, although they might seem convenient, they could be a nightmare. Okay, for sure. Okay, Eureka.
Hello, sorry I got here late. I just got home, so
Problem.
it's a little rush.
Crazy traffic. I was kind of that myself. I saw Philip a moment ago. I guess he must have gotten knocked out. So he'll be back. Nigel, I guess, is somewhere. And Chantel. Okay, so I'm sure they'll catch up at some point. As I said, next week is your midterm examination. I understand from BIFs that those persons who are in New Providence, you will have to report to BIFs at 6:15 to write your examination in-house. And if you're out of New Providence, you will be in the same room with your colleagues, writing the examination with your cameras on remotely. Okay, with an invigilator as well. So one way or the other, you'll all be in the same room, writing the same examination beginning next week at 6:30. For those of you who are coming to the classroom and to the internet, try to get there around 6:15, 6:20, so you can sit down, relax before the examination begins. You will not need the full examination time, but it will be available to you. I will give you the full examination time, so you have no time constraints worrying about the clock running out. Okay, hopefully that'll help some people to relax and come up with their best work, for sure. All right. Anybody started working on the case yet? That's your final answer? Music. Anybody started working on the case yet?
Not yet.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you still have another 5 weeks and change, but don't wait until the last minute. The last minute stinks. Unless you're one of those people who love intrigue and stress. Okay. All right, so let's get into chapter 3. Remember, your examination will be based on the first 3 chapters that we've covered. No small amount of material. It's quite a bit to digest, and hopefully you guys have been studying and making your notes all along, and all of that work will be put to the test next week. All right, so chapter 3 then is all about what? Anyone? Chapter 3 is all about what?
The credit file.
Credit file. Now, those of you who work in the mortgage and lending arena, the credit file is probably where you file whatever you file in the department. You may not even
It's the legal portfolio.
who's Who's?
Chanico.
Tanika, are you there? Tanika?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, so are you involved with the filing of credit documents?
Yes, I am.
Yes, you are. Now, maybe the people in your department do not give you the feeling as if that's a very important function. We all have a tendency to treat filing of documents as a sub or mediocre or average type of work until, of course, something goes wrong and documents need to be produced for the board, or worse, documents need to be produced for the courts. And then suddenly,
Yes.
yes, right, Tanika?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then suddenly everybody, all eyes turn to Tanika. She's the superstar or the whatever if it doesn't go right. So yeah, this is a very important function, and you're going to see some expressions, Tanika, that will put a lot of that part of your work in perspective. Some names will come up that you may not actually use, but they refer to the same kinds of things that you do. And quite frankly, these concepts of the credit file has to do with any structured filing system. In this case, we call it a credit file because it's filing credit documents. But of course, it applies to any kind of filing system and any set of documents. Okay? Very important function. Whether the filing is manual or electronic, proper filing systems are absolutely crucial. Okay? One of the other things we tend not to think about when it comes to files is first securing them, making sure that every Tom, Dick, and Harry does not have access to them, and that if you want to get those files, you need to get permission. Tanika, in your area, can anybody go and open up a filing cabinet and take out whatever they want?
Well, yes, in the Freeport office, but I know in the Nassau office, you pretty much had to send an email to request the file,
Yes.
and then the clerk would go and get it for you, and pretty much you weren't, the file couldn't sleep out.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Now,
Mhm.
that's what we call super security and protection. And quite frankly, that's how it should be. Okay?
Mhm.
That is kind of the ideal situation. The other extreme is when any Tom, Dick, and Harry can open the tray. It's not locked. Nobody's controlling it. And then when something goes missing, nobody knows nothing about anything. And then you have a big old stinky problem. Okay?
That would be a tragedy, right, Enrique?
A major
Right.
tragedy. Okay? So if you work in an environment where the filing cabinet is available to every rat that passes, quote unquote rat, of course, you guys need to find some way to put it under some kind of lock and key security, some kind, because sooner or later, what does not happen in a million years will happen in a split second. Something is going to go missing, either intentionally or unintentionally. It's a whole other discussion. All right, but we're going to talk about the romantic side of the credit file, not the crazy stuff where things go missing. People are upset, so they start grabbing stuff and ripping it up, or some cases coming up and decide that if that file disappears, that the bank has no case to answer. I know it sounds like something on TV, but don't presume it's just for movies. Okay, whatever you see in the movies typically happen in real life somewhere, sometime before, and will be sometime in the future. Make no mistake. Okay. All right. So this credit file then is a consequence of the granting of credit. Seems pretty straightforward. And when you're granting credit, you need somewhere to do your work. We call that where the credit department, which we talked about last time, the structure of the credit department, who's in charge, who does what, from the vice president of credit all the way down to the director of credit, all the way down to the credit manager, credit supervisor, all kinds of levels within the department, depending on its size and location and the number of branches and geographic locations. That's what we were talking about last week. Okay. And so this credit business, and remember, credit can start from one person in a one room and then end up eventually, depending on where you are in the world, and multi-geographical areas, serving the entire globe, depending on what kind of credit you're in. Okay, all the way from international finance, to merchandising, financing, etc. These credit is a very crucial and sophisticated financial function, that we just kind of take for granted, like breathing. Okay, we don't really think about it much until we need it, kind of thing. And nobody cares about what goes on the inside except the people who make it work, kind of things like war. Nobody cares much about war if they're not in it. You don't care a whole lot until you're finally in the war. And then you're like, my God, I never thought that these guys in the mortgage shop did all this stuff. Okay? They made it look so simple. All right. So the credit department is set up for the granting of credit. That's no secret. And what is no secret also is that what you should have in your credit department is a file for every customer. Simple as that. Every customer, every client, there should be an individual file for that person or entity. What do I mean by entity? What is an entity, anyone? What is a business entity? It's another name. Anyone?
Establishment.
What kind of establishment? You're on track. What kind? What do you call it? What do we call it from day to day? We don't say, for example, I'm going to open up an establishment. What do we say? I'm going to open up
A store.
company. Yeah. So when you hear the word entity, typically referring to a business or company, okay, as opposed to an individual, which is a little, of course, different from the company itself. Remember, the individual is a natural person, your customers who come in, and then we have entities, who happen to be companies. Okay, and these are not natural people, these are lawfully established people, quote unquote, in case you never heard it that way. Right. All right. Does anybody have any idea why people start companies rather than keep businesses in their personal name? Anybody knows why? Why do we open companies rather than keep business in our personal name sometimes?
So they can hide the money, hide the profits.
That's one reason for some people. The other reason is if you open a company to do business, if the company fails or the company is sued, the creditors can only take what's in the company, not, they can't go after your personal assets. If you run a business with your, just as a sole proprietor and not a company, and you run into legal trouble or the creditors, you owe the creditors money, if you are not able to pay and you don't have enough resources in your company that you're running, then they have the legal right to come after your personal assets as well, your house, your car, and whatever else you own. Okay? So if you're not incorporated and you're doing business, make sure you do business carefully. And if your business starts to grow and get a little larger than you thought, it's always a good idea to switch over from a sole proprietorship or small business to a company, so that you can protect your personal assets if something goes wrong, especially if you're borrowing money. Because creditors are relentless when it's time to get their money back. And I think we may have had that discussion somewhere along the way. Lenders are relentless to get their money back because the money they've loaned you is not theirs. It's their depositors' money. That's why they want it back. And the second reason they want it back is because interest applies to all the loans that they give, and they want that too. Because interest is used to pay the lender's day-to-day expenses and contribute to its profits. Okay? So in case you thought you were just giving loans, you're not giving loans. You are giving loans, you're not giving loans, you're not just giving loans. You are involved in a very sophisticated business activity that generates millions and millions of dollars in profits every year for lending institutions of all kinds around the world. big, big, big business. So don't let anybody come to you with this thing, you're just a loan officer. That's just an expression, there's so much more involved, depending on what area you're in. And all of the lending areas are important, because people are borrowing from any area you can think of, all the time, every day. Okay? So you have a credit department, you're doing credit, you're giving loans, whatever type of loans you're giving. And as a result, you have eventually a compilation or buildup of files that you get from all the documentary activity that you do within the lending department. Okay. Whatever work you do, letters, documents, mortgages, whatever it is, they should be properly filed away under the client's name, and there should never be any doubt about who is who and what is where. Okay. For sure. Filing gets tricky because sometimes it is subject, we are told, to human error and excitement. And sometimes we do this funny thing that we call misfile. So instead of putting the document in the correct file, we put it in somebody else's file. Then when it's time to find it, we can't find it, and everybody's in a mess. And then depending on how important that document is, the supervisor or manager will say, fine, maybe somebody misfiled it. So we have to check every single file in the cabinet, which is another nightmare. Nobody wants that. So filing should be careful and meticulous, otherwise it can lead to huge problems. And it's all about containing the information on the client so that when you need it, for whatever reason, whether it's for the client, for the government, for your creditors, for the courts, does not matter. And in the world of credit, you can need your documents for anything imaginable. Credit, as I told you in the first session, credit is a very dynamic area. And anybody who's working in credit doesn't see that, they're dead, or they just don't probably need to be in that job. Always something going on, always something to be creative about, always something to change, always something to upgrade, always. And that's what makes lending and credit of all kinds fascinating. Okay? Don't forget, we introduce you to a new kind of credit in this particular part too, called merchandising credit. So whenever we say credit, we mean the whole 9 yards. Okay? And of course, the credit policy we talked about last time should definitely have something in it about the credit file. That's how important it is. There are some companies or policies that do not talk about the credit file because we just take it for granted, like it's just stuff we put into a cabinet. It's not just stuff you put into a cabinet. It is stuff you put into a cabinet, but the nature and importance of that information, if it is improperly handled, can ultimately create some major problems within the company and financially, and for sure. All right, so careful attention must be given at all times to this area. Nobody should be given the impression that this is a substandard area where we send people to die. That's furthest thing from the truth. You don't believe me? Let something go wrong and you find out soon enough. Might even cost some people their jobs, depending on how serious the problem is relative to those documents that cannot be found. All right. So the type of information that goes into these files, of course, you guys know, it'll vary. If you work for a mortgage company, like one mortgage corporation, then you can have certain types of files. If you work for a retail bank, you can have certain types of files. If you work for a merchandising company, wholesaler, retailer doing credit out there, you can have a certain set of files. You can have files for all kinds of different things depending on your business. And your filing system should be set up accordingly. Okay? Now, we are reminded that because of the importance of the credit that we do, that we have to make sure that we're meticulous about this area, because at the end of the day, reputation comes into play. The customer's perception of doing business with you comes into play. For example, let's say you have a horrible filing system and you have customers who are calling for information, you can't get it to them because you can't find it. That doesn't go down well for your reputation as a business. And don't be surprised if certain customers quietly leave. Okay? Remember, customers don't always tell you they're going, they just leave. And some people say, well, so what? You don't want to stay? Go. But again, that's a whole other problem and a whole other discussion. Every customer is crucial. It's a whole other discussion. All right. So, having said that, let's see. Anybody else come into the room? Philip. Philip, are you there? Philip Russell. Yes, Philip will answer shortly. All right. Where did Eureka go? Eureka, are you still there?
I am just trying to eat my dinner.
Oh, then you can't. Then you cannot eat and read. I will not be responsible for at all. Philip.
Yeah, he was on a call. He's having sound issue with my computer.
Okay, but you're good now.
Yeah, I could have barely, I was in the class, I could hear you, but at bad frequency.
Okay, no problem. I can hear you very well now.
Yeah.
Did you hear any of the conversation about the examination and all that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. So you know, if you're not in New Providence, you go to your computer at 6:15, be there. You're gonna be in the same room as your other colleagues, et cetera, okay?
All right.
Okay. Let's see if anybody else. Yeah, people are here. Okay, great. So who, since Eureka is doing her thing, who's going to pinch it for Eureka? Any volunteers for Eureka?
I started while she's eating.
Reading. Okay, so Eureka, by the time Enrique is done, without swallowing your tongue, you're next. Okay, Enrique, let me see where we paragraph number 3, beginning with when the amount. First page, paragraph 3. When the amount.
The credit file. When the amount of credit is large in relation to the capital of either the seller or the buyer, the seller's credit department will require complete information on the customer. Incidentally, the information in the credit files should be just as complete on borderline cases and on would-be customers who have been refused normal open account credit arrangements on substantial orders. In a department large enough to divide accounts among a number of credit staffers, the amount and nature of information in files will vary from customer to customer for still other reasons. Notwithstanding the closeness of supervision by the credit manager, the skills and attitudes of individuals handling specific accounts will be reflected in a number of ways, including shades of difference in the types and amount of information obtained. This is true even when the level of ability is uniformly high. And in some firms, it is especially true under those circumstances. The background and experience of one credit analyst may result in placing more importance on one facet of credit analysis, while another emphasizes a different area. Both might operate with equally good results. These minor variations diminish in. What? Why am I making like this?
What are you saying?
Hold on, I need to find page 2. Page 2 missing.
Missing, it should be missing, it should be. It looks like it is. Miguel. Okay, after good results, Enrique, go down to page 3, business history.
Okay.
You won't be responsible for those 4 points because you don't have that. I don't know how they got missing. Okay, go down to business history.
Okay, business history. Historical information is an essential part of every credit file. The business age and origins of the customer plays a significant role in every credit decision. Is the company an entirely new business, or was it established many years ago? The first few years are critical for most enterprises as they strive to make their place in the commercial world. The more mature a company is, the more comfortable does the credit grantor feel.
Stick a pen for a minute, Enrique. Let me just say that before he goes on. Notice in this part of the discussion, he's talking about a company that's coming in for a loan. Remember previously in part 1, we spent a lot of time talking about personal loans, loans to individuals. Now we're extending it to the kinds of things that we have to consider and be thinking about when we are considering loans to companies. Okay? And it has some very unique differences from giving loans to individuals. Doesn't change the principle of lending and the process of the decision-making process, but you'll see that there are some significant variations in terms of the loans that we give to an individual versus a loan that we give to a company. Okay, keep going, Enrique.
By the simple fact that it continues in existence 10, 20, or 25 years after its inception, a company indicates that it has some ability to cope with year-to-year as well as the day-to-day problems of economic life. This does not mean that credit investigation and analysis are completed when the customer turns out to be a 10 or 20-year-old firm. Any experienced credit manager can readily recall cases where well-established firms ended with losses to creditors after being in existence for 20, 50, and 75 years or more. Investigating history further, have there been changes in the ownership and management of the customer firm, or is it still in original hands? In some companies, the only changes are additions to management as a result of gradual growth and expansion, along with the normal changes brought about by death and retirement. Remember that a successful business changes hands less frequently than an unsuccessful one. So if there have been repeated changes in the top management of a firm, underlying reasons should be sought out.
And just beware, keep going.
Still on the subject of the age of the concern, let us differentiate between the original business and the present form of ownership. A company may have been formed this year, for instance, but the store, mill, or shoe factory now operating may have been started years before. In this case, we want to know what happened to the company which previously owned the operation. Why is it no longer the owner? There may be very logical and reassuring reasons. It also may be that the store, mill, or shoe factory is a lemon.
What's a lemon, anyone? What's a lemon? It's in inverted commas. What does that mean?
Pop down,
Say it again?
pop down.
What is a pop down? You gave me another one I haven't heard before. What is a pop down lemon, folks? Anyone? What do you mean by pop down, Enrique?
Like how people that say they have a bubbler, a downgrade
Yeah, a downgrade. The only
or a
problem,
lower end.
yeah, the only
Something of
problem,
a lower end.
the only problem is a lemon is even worse than a bubbler. If it could be possible, and here's what I mean. If if you go to a car dealership, for example, to buy a new car, and 1 week later the car starts running erratically and cutting off and cutting on and stop working, and they say that they're going to fix it, and then it continues to do that, and they said they fixed it and continues to do that, and never really works properly anymore, you have purchased a lemon.
Mhm.
A car that does not work properly, a machine or anything that doesn't work as it's intended to work. So if you get married to somebody and they're not functioning as it's supposed to function, then you married a
Lemon? Wow.
wow, yes, is correct. All right. So the point we're making here is if you are a lender of any kind and a company comes to you to borrow money, no matter how, because see, sometimes people feel if the company is only a year or two, it's too risky to give money to. But if it's 30 years old, it's okay to give money to that company. That is not always true.
Right.
All right. And that's what lenders have to be very careful of, whether it's whether we're giving loans to people or companies. Do not judge a book by its cover when you are looking at loan proposals, whether it's for mortgage, business, consumer, does not matter. Merchandising does not matter. Do not. Just how we shouldn't look at people and make judgments until we know for sure. Same thing. When your customer comes in front of you, do not presume. Follow the steps that you've been trained to follow and use your good judgment to help you determine whether it's a good credit risk or not. Don't let all the prejudices and predetermined issues and stuff that you have been told interfere with your judgment and cause you not to check everything as a credit officer you're supposed to check before you finally render a decision. All right, keep going, Enrique.
Ownership history. Historical information on the principals is at least as important as historical information on the company. The general reputation for integrity and ability of each principal often proves to be the deciding factor in a credit decision.
Nice test question. Keep going.
Any business, I can take note of that.
You should. That's
Let me put my answer. I see that underline, so automatically I know to go over that.
yes.
Any business in the long run is only as good as its management. Wow, that's a very good key.
Make no mistake about it.
Good management will help it. Bad management will drag down even a good business.
Now, folks, watch how credit works. He said, good management will help the business to run well. Bad management will drag it down, even a good business. Now, this credit thing, remember I told you may remember from part one even, credit is involved in every phase of everybody's life. If it's not direct, it's indirect. So it impacts, the credit department is impacted by all kinds of things inside and outside. And so you can never determine what's going to come up in your credit department. So in this case, we can even liken the credit department to relationships with people. There are some people who will build you up. They're equated to what? Good management. And then there are other people who will not only drag you down, but run you into the ground if you're not careful. Same thing as with a business. And so credit people also have to be thinking about all these even indirect issues that can come back to impact your credit. That's how dynamic the world of credit is, for sure. All right, keep going.
The history of the owners and managers of a customer concern should be an integral part of every credit file. We want to know who they are, how long they have been with the company, and what their previous business experience has been. If they have not spent their entire careers in this concern, Have they been principals in other businesses as well? And if so, what happened to those companies? Do they have any worthwhile business experience? How old are they? If they are either very young or new to the industry or without experience as managers, we might well proceed cautiously with credit commitments until some solid evidence of ability is demonstrated. Were the principals ever involved with a company that failed? And if they were, what were the circumstances of that failure? Was it the result of incompetence, inadequate capital, general business conditions, mistakes in judgment, or outright dishonesty? If they were unsuccessful before, why should they or we expect that they will be successful now? If the principals have several failures in their background, we might well decide they are just too unlucky for us.
Uh-huh.
Of course, if an individual failed 15 or 20 years ago and has since been connected with the management of successful firms, the failure would diminish in importance.
Thank you very much, Enrique, for all that. So you can see, credit people, no matter what phase of and type of credit you're giving, these are some burning questions. All we've done was extend it to from the individual to the company, but the principles are the same. Doesn't matter whether you're giving loans to an individual or company. The burning questions are the same in terms of what credit people need to be thinking, what they need to be asking, what they need to be analyzing before they finally make a decision. Try not to make predetermined conclusions before you have all the facts. Okay? Oftentimes people who go to prison, for example, never get it together, but not all of them. Some people go to prison and come out and they do very well with their lives. Okay, so we have to look at the big picture, and we cannot stop in the middle and make a decision. Not generally and not in credit. We need to check it to the end, get all the facts before us that ultimately will end up in that credit file for current and future reference, and then, and only then, should we make a what? Informed decision.
Mr.
That's-
Wilkerson,
Yes,
I have a question when you finish.
go ahead.
Okay, what if you have 3 persons coming in? One has the money, one has the business head, and one is just there for just being there. Do you think, and they want to, come in to get a loan, yada, yada. Do you
Yeah.
think the bank or the credit institution will check everything?
They may
Like how
not,
you're saying, like go into detail. Do you think they will check everything about those persons?
Eureka, unfortunately, many times they don't.
Right, because they looking to book the loan so that they can make their targets.
Yeah, absolutely. And notice that part of reality is not in the academic text that we're discussing. What we're discussing is what we ought to do. And really, these are the things we ought to do. And one of the reasons we ought to do it is because of that scenario that you just presented. One has the money, one has the brains, and one is just hanging around. That on the surface seems like a recipe for disaster, but not necessarily. See, that's the point. And you really won't know for sure whether or not it's a recipe for disaster until you go through the process. But unfortunately, like you say, if people have targets to meet and they're under pressure to get the numbers and all this kind of stuff, then quality is going to suffer. And quality all too often suffers. And then later on, the delinquency department suffers, and ultimately the organization will suffer as a result of bad loans. Okay, so yeah, that is an unfortunate truth about this business. And depending on who your competitors are, what your objectives are, what your plans are to be profitable and what's coming down from the board in terms of what they need to see year over year, that could definitely be a problem. A lot of bad loans are done under those conditions, unfortunately. Okay, and that's not the ideal situation. And then some firms say like, yeah, we know some are going to go bad, but if more good goes well than bad, then at the end of the day, we can still have some degree of profitability that we're looking for. Okay, that's a strategy. Is it a great strategy? Not necessarily, but it might be a good strategy in a certain time and place in the market. So you see, crazy as it might be, it's all relative. That's what's fascinating about it. And couldn't think of a more ridiculous scenario that can be right or wrong, depending on how far you go to check it out and what the ultimate results are of that relationship. Absolutely. Three Stooges, that's what that is. And as much as that looks like that could go very wrong, depending on who these stooges are and what your investigations into the fund, because the one who's hanging around may only look like he's hanging around. See what I mean, Eureka? Or he might just be hanging around, but you won't know unless you do what? What do you have to do to find out if he's really hanging around or not?
Well, I think you'd have to do an investigation and see or find out exactly what is his role in this company, what he's going to be doing.
Of course, which leads us to exactly all those questions Enrique were asking in paragraph before the end. Were
Right.
principals ever involved with a company that failed? So, that's the question for all three of them.
Agreed. Agreed.
So yeah, so these questions are not just there for you to like suffer through an examination. These things are real, okay? For sure. Just like people who come in as individuals to borrow, and they say to you, and you say to them, where do you work? And they're like, they tell you where they work is, how long have you been there? They say 6 months. And you where did you work before that? John S. Judd, how long? 2.5 weeks. And where did you work before that? Bacardi, for how long? 6.5 months. And where did you see like that? And you're like, oh my God. There's absolutely no what?
Stability.
No job stability. And for the credit person, job stability is a very important feature. But is job stability the only thing that you should consider? Is it? Is job stability the only thing to consider?
No, I don't know. No, that's not, no.
Even though for some lenders, the minute they see job stability, depending on where their heads are, they panic and tell the customer, sorry, look here, we can't give you no loan, right? You ain't waiting nowhere, no, go work somewhere for 3 years first, then come back, or whatever. That may be true in some instances, but not necessarily in all of them. Because look at this. Even though he has job instability, then he says, Philip, do you have any bank accounts? He said, yeah. What you mean? I mean, do you have any bank accounts? And he says, yes, I do. And then you say as a credit officer, how many bank accounts do you have? He said, I have about 3. And then you say, well, what are the balances on your accounts? Then he says, oh, I have 7,000 on one, 10,000 on the other, and 15,000 on the other one. And then all of a sudden you're like, to hell with that job instability. I can now go ahead and do what, Eureka?
You could book the loan
On what basis?
on the basis that they have a good savings history.
Will you just do it on savings history alone?
No, it shows that the person is it shows some form of stability because they're actually saving in the midst of them losing jobs.
So, or maybe just changing jobs, because sometimes people
Yeah,
go,
could be changing jobs as well.
which is another issue. If somebody's been working like 5 or 6 places in 3 years, you have another burning question to ask. How many of those jobs did you lose and how many did you change and why?
Right.
These are the things that credit people should be involved in, rather than just trying to get things hustled out because they're time constraints. They don't want to be bothered, have to go to lunch. I don't have time to waste with the details. Just let's book it. Let's get the numbers and get these people the hell out of here. That's really not the ideal way to do credit, but it happens a lot. Okay, so if you decide to take this guy with unstable employment and give him a loan, what would be your reason to your supervisor or manager for granting the loan? Anyone? What would be a reason for granting that loan to that guy?
Well, if he's getting a loan at one of the institutions where he has the savings account, based on the amount they're he's borrowing, they could probably put a lien against what the account as some form of security for the loan, so it'll be easier for them. In the event he decides not to pay, they could just take the money. That's the easiest scenario. If he goes to somewhere where he has a loan, he could do that. And
Well-
then
Uh-huh.
I think also it shows he has a good, I mean, I don't know, because I don't know. I mean, he may have money saved, but it shows consistency with savings, but that's it. That still doesn't tell me anything about the person, because he could have gotten the money by buying numbers. Who knows?
So now you have another burning question. Where did you get the money from?
Right.
And then you're gonna get one or two answers. He's gonna try and explain that he saved it, he won it at the gambling house, his dead uncle left it. He's gonna give you an explanation, that's one option. Or he's gonna say, man, look here, I have to tell you where I get all my money from. I go on, man, I'm gonna use my money. You know, I want a more stinking loan,
Yeah.
okay? And if that's the case, then that's the case. But the point I'm really trying to make is the whole credit process is very dynamic. See my point? There's no such thing as just black and white. And any credit person who thinks that they're just in a black and white environment, they're not serious, nor are they taking the work they do seriously. Because credit is 10,000 times more than that, as you can see with Naughty Johnny that we were talking about right away. And that's a minor, simple situation. Imagine if you get into big time credits, where you're giving somebody a mortgage for 30 years. Is that something that should be rushed? I don't think so. If you're doing a 30-year mortgage, a 25-year mortgage, a 20-year mortgage, you need to conduct a proper analysis. Numbers or no numbers, totals or no totals. Because we're talking about giving that money out for 10, 20, 30, 40, 30 years. That's a long time to have money out. And so when you decide to give it to person for that purpose, you need to have a pretty good idea why you're doing that, outside of just getting the numbers or the totals to meet some schedule. Okay, great, absolutely. And see this conversation? That should be the conversation of credit people all the time in one form or another, because things are always happening. So yeah, Naughty Johnny didn't have job stability, but he had some money. If you can prove the money was legitimate money, then hold it as collateral and see if he'll pay his loan. If he doesn't pay, then you can simply pay off the loan. Okay? That's one option. Sometimes people don't pay and you have to pay it off, and other times they shock you. With all that job instability, their loan payments there before the due date. Because job stability is not always a sign of irresponsibility. Other things happen. And it's incumbent upon lending people to find out what happened so that we don't make any predetermined decisions, especially the ones that are wrong. Because we make decisions about people all the time, and oftentimes we are wrong. Same thing happens in credit, and oftentimes we are wrong. So we have to be careful, get all the facts, then make a decision. Keep our emotions out of it. Keep whatever prejudices we have out of it. Keep what we like and don't like out of it. See? So I'm telling you about credit. Credit is not just a purely textbook thing. It's all about the emotions of the lender, the prejudices of the lender and the borrower, and all this kind of stuff coming together in a loan environment. Like back in the day in the United States, for example, when a black person went into the bank to borrow money to get a loan, even if they qualified, they still declined them because, anybody knows the reason? They meet all the loan requirements, but they were still declined because they You guys taking long because they, looks like only me and Eureka in this class. Anybody else here other than me and Enrique and Eureka?
Naked and meat in Concord, Rice.
I'm here.
Who said that? Who said I'm
I'm
here?
here.
Oh, Tanika.
Tanika.
Okay, great, great. So even though they met all the loan requirements, Tanika, why is it that their loans were turned down in those days?
In what days?
I know it. Tanika is so young; it doesn't even dawn on her, which is good. Okay, because somebody my age and a little bit younger will answer that right away. The reason is Tanika, they didn't get it even though they qualified was simply because they were Black.
Oh,
Yeah. And the point I'm making is the granting of credit and the lending and borrowing of money is not purely a textbook exercise. Do you understand? If you go into somewhere to borrow money, Tanika, and you run into somebody who does not like you, even though you qualify, it's possible that they will do what?
deny you?
Is that the right thing to do?
Nope.
No. But given the nature of people, they don't like you, or you did something to piss them off in their opinion, they will use their position, even though it's unethical, and decline your loan, even though you meet all the requirements. Which is why sometimes when you have a concern, what should you do next if they decline it?
Appeal it,
Yeah, ask to see the,
manager.
why not? Because by the time you get to the manager, then all of a sudden you might discover that the person had no basis for doing it. The manager might say, Suzette, why did you turn this down? Everything is in place for Tanika, Jackson. What are you doing? And then suddenly he gives the instruction, please book this loan. See that? And sometimes when people do stuff like that, you don't always know some deep personal reason. There's some crazy reason as well. But the point I'm really making is, in terms of our discussion, is simply that the nature of credit is not just a matter of filling in an application, asking one or two wayward questions, and then deciding based on your own notion, feeling, background, who said what, who said that, who said that, who said that, kind of thing, and then make a decision. That's not how it should work. Okay. Not, and as you can see from what he read, a lot of burning questions to ask. And if you're giving credit to a company, even more burning questions than to an individual, as you can see. In fact, I encourage you guys who might be lenders to isolate some of those key issues that we're talking about in case you may need to investigate some of those areas to see whether you'll find out more information to help you make a better loan decision in your future lending. How about that? All right, thank you, Enrique. Eureka, you ready yet?
I am.
Okay, great. Why don't you pick up with management factors now? Management factors.
Management factors. We have been examining management as a unit, but it usually consists of 2, 3, or more people. Is this management a balanced team? Is there a principal well-versed in each of the management skills, sales, production, and finance? Or do all have the same talents? A management team of salespeople will do a great selling job, but they first have to have something to sell. Their chances of success will be better if they are backed up by someone expert in manufacturing, purchasing, costs, and budgets. If the goods prove defective, if costs were incorrectly determined, or if provisions were not made for adequate financing, the sales team will be in command of a sinking ship.
Hmm.
Of course, this example works similarly, whatever the strong and weak management talents are. The point is that talents have to be balanced.
Wow, and make no mistake, for those of you who already work in credit, you may or may not be aware of the concept of balance. You may or may not understand what it even means to be in a balanced environment. You may be feeling unbalanced and don't know that the word is unbalanced. Okay? But the point is, whatever aspect of credit you're in, there should be some balance in terms of the policy position, some balance in terms of the management team and structure, some balance in terms of how decisions are made, some balance in consistency in decision making so that lenders do not have to wonder, well, yesterday you said that, now today you say this. What in the world will you say tomorrow? Okay, balance, very, very important. Okay. All right, keep going, Eureka. So that's management. Now we have age factors.
Age factors. Is the management balanced as to age? Though not always, the young are more likely to let enthusiasm get the better of prudence. After all,
What does prudence mean, anyone? Ever heard that
I'd say
word?
policies and checking everything to ensure everything is in order.
That is an example of prudence.
Yeah.
But the word prudence itself means exercising wisdom. Okay? Wisdom. That's the whole point. And the example you gave is part of the prudence of the work in credit. Okay, keep going.
After all, judgment does not come from experience. An older hand or two on the management team can be a positive factor. This does not mean that age or maturity are always signs of better judgment, greater wisdom, and more temperance. But an older management without these virtues has been around long enough for creditors to recognize them for what they are. New or young management needs time to exhibit both of its strength and its weaknesses. When a second or third generation assumes the management of an established family business, the takeover is usually gradual, with new people joining the company periodically. These new faces have often grown up in the business, have had ample training, and are in many cases taking over a company infinitely better than established than when the founders set it up. Sometimes this new management is as good or better than the old one. Sometimes it's not as good. If the company is in solid financial condition at the time the takeover is completed, a considerable period may elapse before credit people become aware of the strength or weaknesses of new management. We should be ready as credit professionals to give any new management a long, close look until it has proved itself.
I'll stick a pin before you go on, Eureka. See? These, again, we're talking about how lenders should be looking at giving loans to companies. As you can see, it's very different in many respects in terms of process than it is for individuals. Credit principles still apply, okay, with the 5 C's of credit and all that kind of stuff. But in terms of what to look at, what to think about, what to investigate is significantly different. And so all of these issues regarding the management, the age, the background, the training, the judgment, all these things come into play. And if you are a lender giving loans to a company, do not presume that you should just kind of rush through that particular procedure just to get the loans on the books. Because remember, giving a loan to a company is inherently different from giving a loan to an individual. By all means, All right, keep going.
Business background factors. In looking at the background of principals, we occasionally find that a few years in the career of one of them will be unaccounted for. Often the most worthwhile information is the information that is missing. It is important to ascertain the reason for the omission. Was the individual with a business that failed in that period? The omission might be just an oversight, or it might be an attempt to hide a rather unsavory situation. Whatever the reason, creditors are entitled to know. Sometimes, sorry.
See, hopefully you guys are actually focusing on the stuff that she's reading, talking about, because it is very crucial to the credit decision process. And it's not necessarily something you'd see, especially from a judgmental text perspective. You see, a textbook cannot teach you judgment, nor can it give you experience. That comes over time periods. Okay, so it's very important. And these things that we are saying here, remember, we're talking about giving credit to a company. We're talking about all the burning questions and things we need to look at when we're considering giving credit to a company. If you haven't seen how all of this attaches to the topic, which is the credit file, let me just suggest to you now, the reason and the way it's attached to the topic, the credit file, is because all of this information that we're talking about that we're supposed to be gathering for a credit decision will eventually end up where?
On the file.
Absolutely. And if you do not get complete information, you will then have a what? Incomplete file. Okay? You don't believe me? Let me use another example, human example. Start dating someone. You're so busy flying to Waikiki, having wine, rolling over in the sheets, whatever folks do. Nobody stops to talk to each other about who the hell they're with. Like, who is this person? In the first place, like, where are you from? Is Enrique your real name, or is it Philip? What's your middle name? Who's your family? Where are they from? See, all these what school did you go to? What subjects did you like? Man, sometimes people get so wrapped up in relationship, they forget to get information. And then after they decide, let's get married. That's just like granting the loan. The loan is granted. Then you get married. And then all of a sudden, eventually, the questions you should have considered before you got married start coming up. The problem is, it's too late. The elephant is already in the bloody room. Same thing happens with credit. You don't give ample time to finding out who you're giving credit to, and you just rush for the numbers. Sooner or later, the elephant will come up in the room as a delinquent account, or too many delinquent accounts, for that matter, which is never good. Okay? All right, keep going. Here we go.
Sometimes we find the principals of a customer concern are concurrently interested in other enterprises as well. Then we want to know the extent of their activity with these other firms. We can have no objection to an individual expanding built holdings and wealth, but we are entitled to know if the concerns we are selling is receiving proper management attention. We might also want to keep an eye on those other interests for if those companies encounter financial problems, common management might, in the best of faith, divert some of the financial resources of our customer to the ailing enterprise. This might then affect the ability of our customer to pay their bills.
My point, there's nothing There's nothing out of the purview of credit. Even the stuff that is seemingly disconnected is somehow connected. And if you fail to see that, you will fail to exercise the full and proper judgment that is required. That will oftentimes be the difference between a good credit officer, manager, etc., and an excellent one. The one who is able to be thinking about these, what appear to be out of the box issues. Sometimes that is the difference between success and failure in the credit world and in any other world. All right, keep going.
In this examination of historical information, we have used the nouns principal and management interchangeably. For our purposes, they are interchangeable because in the majority of the credit files, the two words refer to the same people. In all but the large publicly held companies, the owners of a customer firm are also the active managers, sometimes with the assistance of additional executive help. These are the people who influence the affairs and destinies of customer firms. And so they are the people in whom we are interested. The word principal serves for our purposes as a synonym for the word management.
Thank you so much, Eureka, for that historical account. And the historical account is really about whoever you're giving your money to as a lender, you should know about their background. Whoever you're giving your life to, when you get married, you should know about their background. Because not only are you getting married to them, you're planning on having permanent children. See, it's a very serious egg. Okay? When you're lending your money, first of all, it's the depositor's money to begin with. It's not even your money. It's either the taxpayer's money or the depositor's money. And so we have to exercise great wisdom and care to the greatest possible extent. And this is what getting historical information is about. Investigating all the relevant facts before you advance the funds. Because once you give it, only God knows what's going to happen afterwards. Should that get in the way of your making loans? Of course not. You're in the business of making loans. Remember, we already said, whenever you look at a loan proposal, your first inclination should be that yes, and let your investigations get you to yes, or ultimately no. That's the whole point. Otherwise, what's the point in doing that business to begin with? Right? You can't duck and dodge everything because it looks like it may not work. You have to investigate it, check it, ask the questions, do your due diligence, and then make a decision. Hopefully, the majority of cases it'll work, and the minority of cases it won't. The majority will balance off and supersede the minority, and you run a profitable business. God forbid. But that's part of the risk of doing business. Okay. All right. Philip, are you there? Philip is not there. I guess he must be hanging with Tanika. Tanika, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
You have any idea where Philip is?
I have no idea.
All right, that's an old credit joke. But guess what? Notice the more questions I ask, what happens, Tanika? Even though the questions might be far-fetched, what happens? The more information I get, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Because if I say, do you know where Philip is? You said, I have no idea. What you're really telling me is, I have no idea, and don't ask me any more questions about it. And then, which is fine, you're right. And then I'm like, okay, she doesn't want me to ask any other questions. I wonder why. And then I'll say, well, I know you don't know who he is, but can you give me some idea of how I might reach him? Because I have something important to say to him. And then you say, well, I already told you I don't know. Or you might soften up a little bit and say, you know what? Why don't you ask Enrique? He might be able to tell you, see, and then all of a sudden, now I'm getting somewhere again because I didn't stop at your first answer. And that's how credit people should be. That's how a lot of professions should be. But the work that you guys do in credit, that's how you have to be. You have to ask questions, ask questions, ask questions. Find out why, where, who, when, what. And the more frustrated your client get, the more they'll be suggesting to you that maybe you need to give that some second thought. Because if they're getting frustration just by giving you the answer to some simple questions, why should you give your money from your organization to them? Does everybody see that?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, so if you have a customer come with a big smile and then after you start asking questions, they start getting antsy. That's not good. I'm not saying they don't have a reason for getting antsy, they may just be nervous. But nevertheless, it's not good. It's a red flag, perhaps. As Mr. Jones, you appear to be antsy. Is something wrong? Ain't nothing wrong, man. Y'all just keep flicking asking people all these questions. See? Now, in addition to whether he has collateral, stability of job, and so on, now you have a new issue to look at. This guy's a little cranky. Should we give our loan to a cranky person? Well, there's nothing in the text that says if they're cranky, you shouldn't do the loan. You should look at the whole picture still. See my point? But again, crankiness could lead to attitudinal issues. And we know that people with poor attitudes sometimes don't pay their loans the way they should. And so how do you determine whether to go forward or not? You keep your investigations going until you get to the end, and then you make a judgment call. How do you get good at judgment calls? Experience and training. That's how you get good at it. It's nothing magical whatsoever. Okay, Janika, why don't you pick up for Philip then? Line of business factors.
Okay. Line of business factors. The customer's line of business is another area where background information is needed for the credit file. In what industry is the customer active, and what is its role in that industry? If our company sells a product used by only one line of business, we automatically get the answer to the first part of this question. The second part of the question is answered by learning whether the customer is a manufacturer, wholesaler, or retailer. First, let us concern ourselves with the industry question. Our product might be sold to a number of industries, or our product may sell many different products to a wide variety of trades. A leather processor might find customers among manufacturers of shoes, gloves, luggage, upholstery, and specialty items. A steel mill's customers could include both industrial and consumer good manufacturers, with the latter group running from automobiles to putty knives. The products of chemical producers and textile manufacturers, for instance, have many uses and are sold to scores of trades. Each industry has its own problems and peculiarities. Tongue twister.
Yeah.
And these have a bearing on credit decisions. When the grantor sells to a number of trades, its credit department will then be able to analyze the customer firm in light of its knowledge of the industry. As mentioned earlier, many large and diversified credit grantors divide their credit departments into industry groups, each staffed by different analysts. We indicated that a customer's role in its industry would fall into one of three broad areas: that of manufacturer, wholesaler, or retailer. The latter two classes consist of enterprises that do not change the nature of the products bought and sold. They sell merchandise in the same form in which they buy it. The retailer sells goods in small units to the general consuming public. The wholesaler buys in large lots from the manufacturer and sells in smaller lots to the retail stores and some manufacturers. The wholesaler in some industries is called a distributor, in some a jobber. The three names describe the same general function.
Before Tanika goes on, folks, I just want to make a note of something that I hope you discovered so far. This part of the part 2 of this course, notice in addition to focus on the merchandising side of credit, we have some interesting discussions about the players. And the discussion about the players and the definitions given as to who they are and how they interact in the world of business and credit, whether you're aware of it or not, is really information that is designed to enlighten you even further, to make clear to you a whole lot of things that are going on in the world of credit in general, and to give information on stuff that you need to know, not only as a lender, but also as and a professional, but also as an individual. So I'm hoping that you're looking and thinking about it not only from a pure credit perspective, but from an all-enveloping kind of information source, so that the more information you have, the better you will generally function in your professional life, period. Okay? Something to think about. All right. It's not just there to torture you through an examination process. It's really there to give you all kinds of relevant information, that such as when you need it, you can refer to it, call on it, and implement it if necessary. Okay? All right, keep going.
The manufacturer, however, creates products from materials, parts, or components by utilizing labor, processing treatments, or assembling operations. In some trades, the manufacturing firm may be called a processor, a refinery, or an assembler. The manufacturer often acts as a wholesaler as well, selling products directly to other manufacturers, or if the products are consumer items, directly to the retail store. Sometimes the manufacturer performs the retail as well as the wholesale function, along with the original function of production. Some clothing and shoe manufacturers own their own retail stores.
Now, let me say something else before she goes on. Remember during COVID, there was a lot of discussion about supply chain shortages. Anybody remember that?
Yeah, in some instances, I couldn't get no Lysol.
There you go. And the reason why you couldn't get any Lysol goes all the way back to this very same manufacturer who, for whatever reason, COVID or otherwise, had to stop producing Lysol. And therefore, if the manufacturer didn't make it, the wholesaler couldn't buy it because it wasn't there. And if the wholesaler couldn't buy it, the retailer couldn't get it, which is in the food store where we get it. And if the retailer couldn't get it, then we couldn't get it. So you can see. And of course, a part of this would have been COVID at the time, and maybe some other part of it could have been the difficulty in getting credit of some kind in order to facilitate the manufacturing process after the whole madness of COVID. So again, all of these things are interrelated. Remember, before COVID, people in lending would never have thought that something would have come along to create a delinquency crisis such as COVID. It was a nightmare. Nobody could have predicted it. That's the part of credit that we have no control over. We call it the uncontrollable. Okay, and there's absolutely nothing we can do except to what? Strengthen our businesses in the event that such a thing happens. Because now we found out that such a thing not only can happen, but has happened. And those firms that were not well prepared suffered the consequences. And some firms that were well prepared still suffered the consequences. And lenders, to a very great extent, had to write off a whole lot of bad loans, make a whole lot of adjustments until people can get back to work and all this kind of stuff in order to get their lending business up and running and functional again. Okay? Never a dull moment in credit. Okay? All right, keep going, Kanika.
Industry factors. From credit file information on the customer's line of business and method of operation, and from their own knowledge of the industry, credit analysis should be able.
Sorry, that word, yeah, that's a tongue twister. All right, so don't worry about it. It's actually analyst.
Okay. Credit analysts should be able to develop a clear picture of the customer's place in its industry, its production needs, sources of supply, and its distribution processes. The credit file should contain answers to at least these 5 questions regarding a concerns method of operation.
Nice test question. Let's see what those 5 things are. Number 1.
Number 1, what does the customer buy? If the concern is a manufacturer, this should tell us something about the continuity of supplies and the quality of product. This knowledge also permits us as credit grantors to quickly gauge the effects of future raw material price deadlines or declines or increases, or of possible material shortages. If the customer is a wholesaler, we need to know if the account handles a balanced line of products, providing entry to large number of outlets in all seasons. The answer to this question will also tell whether the wholesaler or retail firm is handling lines known for quality and responsibility, or lines catering primarily to price consciousness.
So let me say this. So while you guys are in your credit jobs trying to figure out if you should give the mortgage corps money to these people who are smiling as if everything is fine in their lives for the next 25 years, while you guys are doing that, and other lenders are giving consumer loans to all kinds of people for all kinds of reasons, and then other lenders giving loans to businesses so they can buy inventory and have an overdraft to pay bills that come up unexpectedly and so on. While all those things are happening in that side of the credit, these people in merchandising credit are looking at all this other sophisticated, crazy stuff from wholesalers and retailers and manufacturers and trying to make a determination when is a good time to extend credit to any of these groups, how much, and if to do it at all. Okay? And of course, let's not forget the consequences of not doing it. Because sometimes the consequences in terms of manufacturers, wholesalers, and retailers of not doing it are greater than doing it. Hence, if they can't get the money, the product cannot be manufactured and moved down the chain, and sooner or later, we as consumers are going to be crying. No tissue again? What the hell is going on? Speaking about tissue, does anybody know if we manufacture tissue in the Bahamas? Credit people, does anybody know we manufacture tissue in the Bahamas?
No, I don't know.
Not that I'm aware of. Anybody else?
I think we used to. I know Super Value used to produce their own tissue and sell it at one point.
And then what happened?
I think the company is now closed.
Now, folks, let me ask you something. And again, I'm just like, kind of being the devil's advocate from the business side of things and from the lender side, because the lender has to come in to make it happen. Let's be real. Are we ever going to stop using toilet tissue?
No.
Yes. No. Okay. And let's not forget that toilet tissue is not only used for one purpose, it has multi-purposes. So if that is the case, why are we not producing toilet paper in the Bahamas? Somebody answer that question.
I think this is just Erica's personal view.
Yes.
I think the reason why we're not doing it is because we in the Bahamas have because of our lifestyle, we tend to use a lot of American products. And I have found, based on what I've seen, the Bahamian product compared to the US product was not of the same quality. Granted, yes, we do need it. And the price probably was cheaper, but people like, with the name around this, Shaman.
Yeah.
And so they never used to, I don't think they used to support it as much. And I think that may have been one of the reasons why they closed. But like I said, I don't know.
Granted, that's a possibility. However, since we know that 400,000 people are not going to ever stop using tissue, then shouldn't somebody investigate to find out how to make the tissue softer? That's not a practical thing to do.
It is practical, but who has the money to do it?
That's where lenders come in. But lenders don't want to do those kinds of loans, eh? So if the typical lender doesn't want to do it, then we pull a mortgage corp type thing. They let the government do it. Grant the loan to do it. Go in the world and find out how does the rest of the world make it soft. And I'm sure tissue around the world is not as soft as Shaman. Tissue in China and India and Africa, I don't think so. But they don't import a whole bunch of Shaman because of it. Granted, Bahamians are finicky. But if we can get it even half as soft, then we can put a tariff on Shaman and only allow a certain amount to come in so the Bahamian product can sell locally. If we can get it reasonably soft. The question is, who has the nerve to be bothered with that or interest? But imagine if you could possibly get past that. Imagine, just close your eyes and think. We do it with hamburgers every day. We plow hamburgers every day. How many hamburgers do you think we prepare every day, anyone? Thousands and thousands. Some food for thought. Keep going, Tanika, and that's only one product. Tanika,
Oh, pardon me?
you keep going.
Oh, okay. What
Yeah,
does the customer
sharp,
firm? What does the customer firm sell? This tells us what the account manufacturers, distributes, or retails, and helps us pinpoint our customers' position among the competition. If we know the industry, we know a lot more about the customer's problems. 3, to whom does the customer sell? Is the distribution wide or narrow? What industries are sold and what is the percentage of volume to each? If the customer has only 3 outlets, sales and credit problems are considerably different than those of a firm with 5,000 customers spread among several industries. Are its customers manufacturers, wholesalers, retailers, or the general public? Each area will present different problems to our customer, and we want to be aware of our customers' problems. Number 4, what credit terms does the customer firm extend? These terms are usually established by trade custom, but will have direct bearing on how we will be paid as the creditor. If several trades are sold by the customer and different terms are given to each trade, We will want to know the percentage of annual volume to each trade. We might also learn here if the customer is promoting sales by offering unusually long credit terms. What is the nature of the customer's plans and equipment? Is it modern and efficient or old and obsolete? In most industries, at some time or other, the development of new techniques can cause a manufacturer to lose competitive position. Is the plant and equipment owned or leased? The implications of this information will bear heavily on our analysis of financial statements.
Thank you very much, Janika, for ending on those 5 questions. We can come up with a similar 5 questions for persons who work in mortgages. We can come up with a similar 5 questions. All we need to do is change some of the words, and we have the same burning questions that we should have answers to. Any type of credit that we give, that's the whole point. Okay? We're just highlighting the merchandising side of it. But these 5 questions can be tweaked to be asked of any kind of credit facilities that we're considering, and answers to those questions would be very important to making the credit decision. And notice, the more we read and talk, the fuller the credit file is getting. Has anybody noticed that? Anybody notice that?
Yes, the credit file has a lot of information, I see.
Absolutely. So if you work somewhere and you see like a little puny credit file, I'm not saying that that's not a legitimate credit file. I'm just saying, after some introduction to this kind of stuff where so much information needs to be gathered for a credit decision or not, it begs the question as to why would you have a file with a very little bit of information? It may suggest that persons are not doing everything necessary to see whether or not a loan can be done. Okay, interesting look. How can the credit file suggest what's going on in the credit department? Easy. It's skinny. It's thin. It feels like it doesn't have enough information. It causes you to want to check it to see what is actually in it. That all the information didn't go in it. Some went somewhere else, in somebody's drawer. Somebody ripped some stuff up. Whatever it is, the condition of the credit file is a serious indicator of what's going on in your credit department. And in case you never thought about that before, think about it.
So, Mr. Wilkinson, you think they do unscrupulous stuff like that? Like getting rid of some of those information that's supposed to be on the file?
Make no mistake, depending on what comes up, people will do it. Let me give you another example. Many years ago, and a couple of years ago, and not too long ago, they discovered that the courtroom was broken into and certain files were taken and destroyed. It just so happens that those files were files that belonged to the prosecution that they were going to use to prosecute somebody for an offense. Somehow they either got inside information, or whatever the case might be. Sometimes people break in to get it, to destroy evidence. Other times they know people on the inside and they get them to take it out of the file. And other times they pay people an amount of money they wouldn't believe to take it out and destroy it so that no case could be made. And so, yes, it does happen even at the highest legal level and legislative level. And make no mistake, depending on what credit department you're in and what part of the world you're in, what kind of characters you're dealing with, you'd be more than shocked to discover that it happens. I hope it doesn't happen in the Bahamas, but then police are getting shot in the face, so stuff is happening in the Bahamas. Imagine that. That means if these guys are not afraid to shoot and kill or damage a police officer who is trained to apprehend them, we are at their mercy. How spooky is that? I wonder if there are any credit implications there. There are. Credit implications are everywhere. Because if somebody robs a guy who has a loan with you and shoots him dead, you have a credit problem. Now his wife has to try and pick up the loan. She can't afford it. Now you have to restructure the loan, call the loan, foreclose on the loan. See? All because Tom Jones decided he was going to pull a gun on who he thought was just Tom Jones. Didn't dawn on him that he was a husband, a father, and a borrower from your institution, no less. And just got the loan 2 years ago. 23 more years left to go. Credit affects everything, either directly, or credit is involved in everything, either directly or indirectly. This little discussion about manufacturers, wholesalers, and retailers, man, that's just the core of the credit and merchandising enterprise in a long chain of multi-billion-dollar credit transactions that take place between all of these sectors. I hope by now we all know the difference between wholesalers, retailers, and manufacturers. These are all issues that you may run into in your credit life in one form or another, or you may run into in your non-credit life, or you may run into in your next job when you either resign from your credit job or you are fired because they don't like you or whatever. Who knows? It's all about the irony of it all. Okay? Just some food for thought there. If you think you're just giving a few little stinky loans every day, it's not that. It's a whole lot more. Okay? All right, let's see if Philip is up and running. Philip? Danica has been pinch hitting for you. Are you there? Looks like Philip has gone off to Fusion again.
No, Philip probably going work for Krakow.
Oh, Krakow, that's it. That's the culprit. I know Juliet is not so hot. Juliet, are you still there?
Yes, I'm here.
If you're not in the mood, let me know. I won't stress you.
No, I'm not in the mood tonight.
Trust me, I won't. I know the feeling. All right. So Philip is going to for Krakow. Tanika's read. Erica's read. Well, Enrique, it looks like you're going to end the evening. You have any problems with that?
I could read it.
Okay. Let's let it rip. Method of operations. More stuff for the credit file.
Method of operation factors. There are other questions that might be asked about a customer's method of operation. It is less likely the answers to these questions will be contained in the credit file. The answers are more likely to constitute the background information that a knowledgeable, experienced credit analyst develops after being exposed to a particular industry. What they say, the?
Yeah, that should be the. Oh,
The
sorry.
input-
This.
This, but let me write that.
Yeah, this information.
This information forms part of the general economic picture of an industry and alert responsive credit managers make it their business to acquire this information. Some of the questions are, number one, is the line of business seasonal? Number two, if it is, what are the peak months? Number three, what is the industry's average manufacturing and distributing time? Number four, is it an industry that requires a large capital investment? Number five, is a large investment needed in plant and equipment? Number six, what is the optimum size, the most efficient unit for an operation of this type? Number seven, is the industry extremely sensitive to economic conditions? Number eight, is style sense an important factor? And lastly, number nine, is it an industry requiring highly technical skills and abilities?
Got a question?
Ownership,
Keep going.
ownership factors. Business enterprises, just as people, are subject to the laws of municipal, state, and federal governments. Laws define the rights and responsibilities of individuals under all sorts of circumstances, including their rights and responsibilities as organizers, owners, and operators of business enterprises. From a legal standpoint, business organizations are divided into three major groups. Number one, proprietorships or individual ownerships. Number two, general partnerships. And lastly, number three, corporations.
Let me just say before Enrique goes on, that question is so tempting. It is probably going to be a question I'm going to ask for two reasons. One, because these three forms of businesses need to be known to every person who needs to know, whether you're in credit or not. They're absolutely vital to what we do here in the Bahamas and everywhere in the world as far as businesses are concerned. And secondly, as credit professionals, you need to be very clear on what those three kinds of businesses are. So I suspect you can expect a question on that. Keep going.
Okay. The credit file should always indicate the legal form of ownership being used by the customer. Creditors are interested in knowing the form of organization for the effect it might have on the conduct of the business. In certain situations, the form of ownership might also have an effect upon appraisal of credit risk. Proprietorship. Oh, that's the first one.
Yeah, that's the first one. Great.
The proprietorship has one owner and is the simplest form of organization. There are no special laws covering this form. The owner is the business and the business is the owner. John Jones, trading as the Jones Merchandise Company. All of the business assets are Jones's assets, and all of the business debts are Jones's debts. Any assets Jones may have outside the business are available for the satisfaction of business debts. The owner has complete control, and if the business is small enough to manage all of its phases, this form is suitable. Creditors should learn if their proprietorship customers have capable assistants, able to run the business in the event of the owner's illness. They should also determine if provision has been made for continuation of the business or for orderly liquidation in the event of the owner's death. If we are important suppliers, we should determine if a will exists and if enough life insurance is carried on the life of the owner. Most proprietors should be prudent enough to make these provisions, and we should be alert enough to ask the necessary questions.
Okay, lenders in this room, a word to the wise is sufficient. That last sentence, among all the other things we've talked about, is the reason why you spend time and resources to do this stuff, because these things are so absolutely crucial to the work you do in one form or another. If you're not doing it yesterday, you're doing it today. If you're not doing it today, you'll be doing it tomorrow. So, welcome aboard. This is just more information to expand your horizons in terms of what's out there in the market and in the world that you are facing as lenders or you will face potentially going forward. All right, keep going.
Okay. Partnership. A partnership is an organization of two or more individuals combining to act as owners. The individuals might be equal partners, or the ownership might be divided on some other basis, such as 40% for one partner and 30% for each of two others. Regardless of the partnership percentage, each partner is personally liable for all debts of the business. Any personally owned assets outside the partnership are also available to creditors for the satisfaction of the debts of the partnership firm. Each partner is responsible for the business acts of the other partners. So it is more important that the partners understand the duties of each. While legally not necessary, prudence dictates that there be a written partnership agreement outlining the duties of each partner, the capital contributed by each, the salaries or drawings allowed each, and the method by which profits are to be shared.
Now you can see, for example, why we refer to marriage as a partnership. Whatever
Mhm.
one does, the other one is impacted. Doesn't matter if you didn't know that they hid it from you. They didn't tell you. Doesn't matter. Once one partner makes a decision in that marriage, the entire the other one is affected and will have to deal and live and help to work through the consequences. Why? That's why it's so important before you get into any business partnership, know who the hell you're getting into business with. Same thing. Before you get into any marriage partnerships, try to find out who the hell you're marrying. Same principle. And the consequences are the same if you don't. Keep going.
A partnership is a satisfactory device for bringing together diversified talents that can successfully work together in developing a business enterprise. A partnership can normally operate a larger business than a proprietorship, but a firm may reach a point in its growth where even the partnership form of ownership is too restrictive. For example, a partnership may find it difficult to obtain substantial amounts of new capital for expansion. While creditors may be attracted by the fact that the partners are each personally liable for all acts and debts of the business, we are more likely to find this advantage more academic than real. Any material wealth outside the business might well be legally owned by other members of the family or be tied up in mortgaged real estate and other complicated investments not easily converted to cash. As in the case of the proprietorship, creditors should determine if arrangements have been made for the orderly continuance or liquidation of the business in the event of a partner's death. Legally, a partnership terminates at the death of one of the partners. Proper agreements, wills, and insurance can provide for a new partnership of the survivors, perhaps with heirs of the deceased continuing the business without interruption. The corporation. A corporation is still another form of ownership. A corporation is a legal but artificial being created by state laws to operate a business upon application by the interested parties, the incorporators. This legal entity or company has the right to make contracts, buy and sell, and do anything that any legitimate business can do. The owners are stockholders who elect a board of directors, who in turn appoint the officers who manage daily affairs. The officers have the titles of president, vice president, treasurer, etc. With most corporate customers, the stockholders Directors and officers are frequently the same people. As separate legal entities, corporations are subject to special taxation by federal and state governments. There has never been any question that the corporation is the ideal form of organization for large-scale operations and diversified ownership. Neither the replacement of officers or directors nor the transfer of stock ownership affects the form of organization. As a distinct legal entity, it has its own life. The federal corporate income tax laws have been modified in recent years. And for this and other reasons, smaller operations have also found the corporation to be the most useful form of organization. It is capable of highly efficient organization by allocating responsibilities to specifically qualified officers. The death of a stockholder or officer is not a mandatory reason for immediate dissolution or reorganization, as in the case of the proprietorship or partnership. The transferability of ownership, the factor of continuous succession of ownership and management, and the greater possibilities of efficient management also make the corporation attractive to the credit manager. But the chief advantage of the corporation to its owners is the fact that their liability is limited to the amount of their investment. In other words, the most corporate principles can lose. That's supposed to be iffy.
Yeah,
Lose if the amount of money they and other stockholders have invested in the corporation. The business debts are not their debts. They are now the corporation's debts, and the outside assets of corporate principals are not available for the satisfaction of corporation debt. Most credit people believe the corporate form of organization is the best form for a business that hopes to prosper, grow, and expand. And with a corporation as a customer, credit grantors know exactly where they stand. They can analyze the customer corporation as a credit risk strictly on its own merits, without entertaining any hopes about additional financial support in some vague background coming to the rescue in the event of trouble. Much has been written about the advantages and disadvantages to both owner and creditor of each of the three forms of organization. We can leave a good deal of this to schoolroom exercises because most of these advantages and disadvantages exist in principle only. As credit people, we should be aware of them, but most of us will find that our important accounts and our important credit problems are almost always corporations. While a great number of local enterprises, such as snack shops and service stations, are conducted as proprietorships or partnerships, most enterprises of any scope or size find it much more convenient to operate as corporations.
indeed, indeed. All right, so we're gonna stop there. In terms of your preparation for next week, let me just say, I think we have kind of touched all the key areas in our reading and our discussions. So if I were you, you don't have to spend a lot of time rereading. You go through your notes and pull out the key stuff. You know which things we emphasize, which things we focus on, which questions we ask, which type of business operations we talked about. Kind of pull out the key stuff and make sure you understand them, you're familiar with them, you can list them. You can give a short definition or explanation as to what they are. Okay? If you do that, you should, along with whatever other study techniques that you use personally, You should not have any real difficulty. Okay? If you run into any questions or concerns during your review of the coming week and you want to clear something up in your mind, please feel free to send me an email or drop me a note, and I'll be happy to respond. Right? Don't forget, those of you who are not in New Providence, you are to be online at 6:15, and those of you in New Providence should be at BIFS by 6:15 next Wednesday, ready to do your very best on your examination. Any question before we break? All right, fantastic. Well, good luck, everybody, with your studies and preparations, and be safe, and I'll see you next week.
Okay, good evening.
Good
Evening.
good night.
Good night, everyone.
Night, Juliet. Hope you feel better.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, Phil. Enrique.